My name is Detective Michael Rodriguez, and I'm writing this report not for official files, but for anyone brave enough or foolish enough to venture into the deep wilderness alone. What I'm about to tell you defies logical explanation, challenges everything I thought I knew about human behavior, and has fundamentally changed how I view the safety of our national forests. This case began 3 months ago when I was assigned to investigate a series of missing persons reports in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. What started as routine missing hiker cases evolved into something far more sinister. A pattern of predatory behavior that suggests we're dealing with something that exists in the gray area between human and monster. I've changed some names and locations to protect the survivors, but every detail of what follows is documented and verified. The evidence sits in sealed files that will never see daylight, buried under bureaucratic red tape and official denials. But the truth needs to be told. People need to know what's hunting them in the wilderness. The first disappearance. Rebecca Castellanos was an experienced wilderness photographer who had been documenting Appalachian wildlife for over 15 years. On October 3, 2021, she embarked on a solo camping trip to capture the fall foliage in a remote section of the park. She was scheduled to return on October 8th. When she failed to check in, park rangers initiated a standard search protocol. Rebecca was known for her meticulous planning and reliable communication. She had never missed a check-in before. The search team found her campsite on the second day, but what they discovered there defied explanation. Her tent was intact but empty. Her expensive camera equipment lay scattered around the campsite, but nothing was damaged or stolen. Her backpack remained untouched, with food, water, and emergency supplies still inside. Most disturbing of all, her boots were found neatly placed outside the tent, as if she had simply walked away barefoot into the wilderness. The only clue to her disappearance was a series of photographs on her camera's memory card. The final images, taken on the night she vanished, showed something that made seasoned park rangers request psychological counseling. The photos were taken from inside her tent, looking out through the mesh window. The first few images showed normal nighttime forest scenes, trees silhouetted against starlight, the dying embers of her campfire. But the later photos revealed a figure standing at the edge of the campsite. At first glance, it appeared to be a person, but as the time stamps progressed, the figure moved closer to the tent with each photo. The final image, taken at 3:47 a.m., showed a face pressed against the tent's mesh window. The features were human, but wrong. Eyes that reflected light like an animal's, skin that seemed too pale, and an expression of such predatory intelligence that it made viewers instinctively step back from the camera's LCD screen. Rebecca was never found. The pattern emerges. Over the next 6 weeks, 3 more hikers vanished in the same general area. Each disappearance followed an identical pattern. Experienced outdoors enthusiasts, solo camping trips, abandoned campsites with personal belongings left behind, and no sign of struggle or foul play. The Park Service downplayed the incidents, attributing them to bear attacks or hiking accidents. But I knew better. 20 years of police work had taught me to recognize patterns. And this wasn't random. Someone or something was systematically targeting lone campers in this specific region. I requested permission to conduct an undercover investigation, posing as a solo hiker to see if I could draw out whatever was responsible for the disappearances. My superiors were reluctant, but the media attention was growing, and they needed results. I should have known better. I should have understood that some predators are too dangerous to hunt, even for trained law enforcement. Into the woods. On November 15th, I entered the backcountry alone, carrying minimal gear to maintain my cover as a casual hiker. I had backup plans, emergency protocols, and a GPS tracker that would alert search teams if I failed to check in. I thought I was prepared for anything. I was wrong. The first 2 days passed without incident. I established a pattern of making camp in the same general area where the other hikers had vanished, hoping to attract whatever was responsible. I documented everything, every sound, every shadow, every feeling of being watched. On the 3rd night, I found the first sign that I wasn't alone. I woke around 2 a.m. to the sound of something moving through my campsite. I lay perfectly still in my sleeping bag, listening to footsteps that circled my tent in slow, deliberate patterns. The footsteps were wrong. Too light for someone wearing boots, but too heavy for bare feet. They made a soft padding sound, like leather being dragged across dry leaves. I reached for my service weapon, but before I could draw it, the footsteps stopped directly outside my tent. I could hear breathing, slow and controlled, just inches from my head. Through the thin nylon wall, I could see a shadow blocking out the starlight. Then a voice spoke, so quietly I almost missed it. "I know you're awake." The voice was human but distorted, as if the speaker's vocal cords had been damaged. There was an odd echo to it, like someone speaking from the bottom of a well. I didn't respond. Every instinct told me to stay perfectly still, to play dead like prey, hoping a predator would lose interest. "I've been watching you for days," the voice continued. "You're not like the others. You're hunting me, aren't you?" My blood turned to ice. Whatever was out there had recognized that I wasn't just another lost hiker. It knew I was there deliberately, and it found that amusing. "The photographer fought hard," the voice said, and I could hear a smile in its tone. "She took such beautiful pictures. Would you like to see them?" The tent's zipper began to move, incredibly slowly, tooth by tooth. I could see pale fingers working the metal slider, taking their time, savoring my terror. That's when my training kicked in. I rolled away from the tent wall and drew my weapon in one smooth motion, firing 3 shots through the nylon. The gunshots were deafening in the quiet forest, but they were followed by something worse. Laughter. High, delighted laughter that seemed to come from multiple directions at once. When I finally worked up the courage to exit my tent, I found large drops of blood in the leaves, but no body. The blood trail led into the forest, but after 50 yards, it simply stopped. Not gradually, it ended abruptly, as if whatever I'd shot had simply vanished. I should have left then, should have called for backup and gotten out of those woods immediately. But I'd wounded it, and wounded predators are the most dangerous kind. The hunt begins. The next morning brought a horrifying discovery. Hanging from a tree branch 20 feet above my campsite was Rebecca's camera, still functional and containing new photos. The images showed me sleeping in my tent, taken from impossible angles, directly above, as if the photographer had been floating in the air. Other photos showed me during the day, hiking, eating, making camp. I'd been under surveillance for days without knowing it. But the final photo made my hands shake. It was a close-up of my face, taken through the tent wall while I slept. Written across the image in what looked like dried blood were 2 words: "My turn." I tried to radio for backup, but my equipment wasn't working. The GPS tracker showed my location as unknown, and my satellite phone couldn't acquire a signal. I was cut off from the outside world, alone in the wilderness, with something that had been studying me like a specimen. That's when I realized the truth. I wasn't the hunter anymore. I had become the prey. For the next 4 days, I was trapped in a nightmare game of cat and mouse. During the day, I would try to hike out of the area, but I kept finding myself walking in circles. Trail markers had been moved or removed entirely. Streams that should have led to roads instead led deeper into the wilderness. Every attempt to escape only brought me further into its territory. At night, it would visit, never directly confronting me, but always making its presence known. I would wake to find personal items moved around my campsite, my boots placed in different positions, my food reorganized, my map redrawn with crude modifications. Once, I woke to find a detailed sketch of my house drawn in the dirt beside my tent, complete with my address and the names of my family members. It was studying me, learning about me, preparing for something. The psychological warfare was devastating. I stopped sleeping, jumped at every sound, and found myself talking to the empty forest just to hear a human voice. My ammunition ran low as I fired at shadows and imaginary threats. My food supplies dwindled because I was too paranoid to hunt or forage. By the 6th day, I was barely human myself. The revelation on my 7th night in that hellish wilderness, I finally saw my tormentor clearly. I had made camp in a small clearing, positioning myself where I could see approaches from all directions. I'd given up trying to escape and decided to make my stand there. If this thing wanted to kill me, it would have to face me directly. Around midnight, it stepped into the clearing. At first glance, it looked human. Tall, lean build, wearing what appeared to be hiking clothes. But as it moved closer, the wrongness became apparent. Its limbs were too long, its joints bent at unnatural angles, and its movement was predatory in a way that transcended normal human behavior. Its face was the worst part. The features were human but stretched, as if someone had taken a normal person and pulled them like taffy. The eyes were too large, too bright, and they reflected light like an animal's. When it smiled, I saw rows of teeth that had been filed to points. "Detective Rodriguez," it said in that distorted voice. "You've been such good sport, much more entertaining than the others." "What are you?" I managed to ask. It tilted its head, considering the question. "I'm what happens when someone spends too long in the deep woods, when they forget what it means to be human, when they discover that hunting is so much more satisfying than being hunted. You were human once." "Oh, yes. Once upon a time, I was just like you. I came into these woods to escape civilization, to find peace in nature. But I found something better than peace. I found purpose. It began to circle me, staying just outside the range of my flashlight beam. Do you know how many people disappear in America's wilderness every year, Detective? Thousands. Most are never found. Their families assume they fell off cliffs or got lost or were killed by bears. But some of them are still out here." "Still out here?" learning, adapting, becoming something new. Its voice carried a note of pride. We've discovered that humans make the most interesting prey, so much more challenging than deer or rabbits. You have intelligence, weapons, survival instincts. You fight back. The plural pronoun sent chills down my spine. We? Oh, yes, detective. Did you think I was alone? We have communities now, networks. We share information, coordinate hunts, trade territories. The deep wilderness belongs to us now. As if summoned by its words, other shapes began to emerge from the forest around the clearing. At first I counted 3, then 5, then lost count as more figures materialized from the darkness. They moved with the same unnatural grace, the same predatory silence. You've been quite the challenge, the first one continued. Most of our prey breaks within 2 or 3 days, but you've lasted a week. That's admirable. What do you want? What we've always wanted, to hunt, to feed, to survive. It smiled wider, showing more of those filed teeth. But you're special, detective. You came looking for us. You wanted to be the hunter, so we're going to give you a choice. One of the other figures stepped forward, carrying something that made my stomach lurch. It was a human scalp, still bloody, with long brown hair that I recognized from Rebecca's missing person photos. You can join us, the leader said. Let us show you what you could become. What freedom really means when you abandon civilization's constraints. And if I refuse, then you'll become a trophy, like all the others. I looked around the clearing at the circle of inhuman faces, watching me with hungry anticipation. My service weapon held maybe 6 rounds. There were at least a dozen of them. But I'm a cop. I've taken an oath to protect people from monsters like these. I made my choice. The escape. I opened fire. The clearing erupted into chaos as my bullets found their marks. These things might have been faster and stronger than normal humans, but they could still be hurt. I saw at least 2 go down before my ammunition ran out. Then I ran. I crashed through the forest in complete darkness, branches tearing at my clothes and face. Behind me, I could hear them giving chase, not just the survivors from the clearing, but others, their calls echoing through the trees as they coordinated their pursuit. For hours, I ran through that nightmare landscape. Every shadow could hide one of them. Every sound could signal their approach. My lungs burned and my legs cramped, but I didn't dare stop. Just before dawn, I stumbled onto a paved road. A Park Service vehicle was approaching and I flagged it down. The ranger who picked me up said I looked like I'd been mauled by a bear. If only it had been that simple. The cover-up. My official report described a hiking accident, equipment failure, getting lost, surviving on my own for a week before finding the road. The wounds on my face and arms were attributed to branches and thorns. The missing hikers were officially declared victims of bear attacks, despite the lack of bear sign at any of the scenes. Rebecca's camera was never entered into evidence. The photos I'd seen were dismissed as stress-induced hallucinations. But I know what I experienced. I know what's living in those woods. Since my return, I've been researching similar cases across the country. The pattern is always the same. Experienced hikers vanishing in remote wilderness areas. Abandoned campsites with no signs of struggle, and official explanations that don't quite add up. I've found evidence of at least 30 similar disappearances in the past 5 years, all in different national forests. The locations form a network, as if these communities are coordinating their activities across state lines. I tried to take my concerns to federal authorities, but my credibility was damaged by the hallucinations in my official report. I tried to organize search efforts for the missing people, but was told the cases were closed. The system doesn't want to acknowledge what's really happening in our wilderness areas. It's too frightening, too disruptive to the tourism industry that depends on people feeling safe in nature. But they're not safe. None of us are. The warning. I'm retiring from law enforcement next month. My superiors think I have PTSD from my experience in the woods, and maybe they're right. I wake up every night expecting to see those filed teeth grinning at me through my bedroom window. But before I go, I need to warn people about what's out there. If you're planning to hike alone in remote wilderness areas, please reconsider. If you must go, never camp in the same spot where others have disappeared. Trust your instincts. If you feel like you're being watched, you probably are. Most importantly, if you encounter other hikers in deep wilderness who seem wrong somehow, too quiet, too interested in your plans, moving in ways that don't seem quite human, get out immediately. Don't try to be polite or social. Don't worry about seeming paranoid. Just leave. The wilderness used to be a place of peace and beauty. Now I see it as a hunting ground, populated by things that were once human, but have chosen to become something else entirely. They're organized, they're intelligent, and they're spreading. I've been tracking online hiking forums and social media groups, looking for reports that match the pattern I experienced. The disappearances are increasing in frequency and expanding into new territories. What started in remote areas is moving closer to populated regions. Last week I found a forum post from a day hiker who claimed to have been followed for miles by someone who moved wrong. The incident occurred just 40 miles from a major metropolitan area. They're getting bolder. I don't know how to stop them. I don't know if they can be stopped. But people need to know what they're facing when they venture into the deep woods alone. The predators we evolved to fear, bears, wolves, mountain lions, follow predictable patterns. They can be avoided with proper precautions. But these hunters understand human psychology. They've learned to use our own instincts against us. They're patient, methodical, and utterly without mercy. And they're always watching. This account is being distributed through hiking safety organizations and wilderness forums. If you have experienced similar encounters, please document everything and share your story. The authorities won't listen to individual reports, but maybe they'll pay attention to a pattern. Stay safe, stay together, and stay out of the deep woods. Detective Michael Rodriguez, retired, November 2021. Mike Thompson had been driving 18-wheelers for over 15 years when he encountered something that would haunt him for the rest of his life. It was October 2019, and he was hauling a load of electronics from Phoenix to Chicago along Interstate 40. What started as a routine cross-country run turned into a psychological nightmare that still makes him check his mirrors obsessively to this day. The first sign something was wrong came around 2 a.m. near Flagstaff, Arizona. Mike noticed a black pickup truck in his side mirror, staying exactly 3 car lengths behind him. At first he didn't think much of it. Plenty of drivers matched the speed of trucks on long stretches of highway to save gas. But as the miles rolled by, the truck remained in the exact same position, never passing, never falling back, just following. Mike tried slowing down by 5 miles per hour. The truck slowed down too. He sped up slightly. The truck matched his speed perfectly. When he took the next exit for fuel and food, the black pickup drove past the off-ramp, but Mike caught a glimpse of the driver in his headlights. A pale man with a baseball cap pulled low over his face, staring directly at him. After refueling, Mike pulled back onto I-40, hoping he'd left his mysterious follower behind. But 20 minutes later, there it was again, the same black pickup, settling into the same position 3 car lengths back. Mike's hands tightened on the steering wheel. In 15 years of trucking, he'd never experienced anything like this. The game of cat and mouse continued through the night. Every time Mike changed lanes, the pickup changed lanes. When he used his CB radio to ask other truckers if they'd noticed the vehicle, their responses only made things worse. "Breaker 19, that black Ford's been running the same pattern for the last 100 miles, came one voice. "Saw him earlier today doing the same thing to another rig near Albuquerque." Mike's blood ran cold. This wasn't random road rage or coincidence. Someone was systematically stalking truckers on this route. As dawn broke over New Mexico, Mike decided to test his stalker. He took an unexpected exit near Tucumcari, driving into the small town and pulling into a truck stop. He positioned his rig where he could watch the entrance and waited. Sure enough, 10 minutes later, the black pickup cruised slowly through the parking lot. The driver was scanning the trucks methodically, looking for Mike's rig. When their eyes met through the windshield, the man didn't look away. He just stared with an intensity that made Mike's skin crawl, then drove off. Mike tried to convince himself to call the police. But what would he say? That someone was following him on a public highway? He hadn't been threatened directly, and the pickup truck hadn't broken any traffic laws. Small-town cops would probably think he was paranoid or sleep-deprived. Instead, Mike called his dispatcher and requested a route change, but his load was time-sensitive, and deviating would cost the company money. "Just keep rolling," his dispatcher said. "You'll be in Oklahoma soon, and the guy will probably get bored and move on." But the stalker didn't get bored. As Mike pulled back onto I-40, heading toward Amarillo, the black pickup reappeared. This time it was closer, just 2 car lengths behind. Mike could see the driver more clearly now, middle-aged, thin face, wearing the same baseball cap. What disturbed Mike most was that the man never seemed to look at the road. His attention was fixed entirely on Mike's truck. The psychological pressure was becoming unbearable. Mike found himself constantly checking his mirrors, his heart rate elevated, his hands sweating despite the air conditioning. He tried calling other truckers on the CB, hoping someone could help, but the responses were unsettling. Several drivers reported seeing the same black pickup following different trucks over the past few weeks along this route. "Driver's been following rigs from Phoenix to Oklahoma City," one trucker warned. "Nobody knows what he wants, but he's persistent. Heard he followed one driver for over 400 miles before disappearing." By afternoon, Mike was near panic. The pickup had been following him for almost 14 hours straight. When did this person sleep? How much fuel did they have? What was their end game? Mike's imagination began conjuring increasingly dark scenarios. Was this person planning to force him off the road? Were they waiting for him to stop at a remote location? The situation escalated near Oklahoma City. Mike needed to take his mandatory rest break. Federal regulations required it, and he was approaching his maximum driving hours. But the thought of being vulnerable while sleeping, with his stalker potentially lurking nearby, was terrifying. Mike chose a well-lit truck stop off I-35, parking among other trucks for safety. He locked his cab doors and tried to rest, but every sound made him jump. Around midnight, he woke to see a figure walking between the trucks with a flashlight, checking license plates and peering into cabs. Mike's heart pounded as the light approached his truck. The figure stopped directly outside his driver's side window and stood there for what felt like an eternity before moving on. Mike didn't sleep another minute that night. At dawn, he started his engine and pulled back onto the highway, desperate to reach Chicago and the safety of the delivery dock. But as he merged onto I-44 toward St. Louis, there it was again, the black pickup, resuming its position like a faithful but sinister companion. The final 12 hours of Mike's journey were a blur of anxiety and paranoia. The pickup followed him through Missouri, across the Mississippi River, and into Illinois. Mike tried everything: sudden lane changes, varying his speed, taking unexpected exits. But nothing shook his pursuer. Other truckers on the CB were now following the situation like a real-time thriller, offering advice and support. But no one could explain the stalker's motives or predict when it would end. As Mike finally approached the outskirts of Chicago, something strange happened. The black pickup began falling back, increasing the distance between them for the first time in over 700 miles. By the time Mike reached his delivery dock on the south side of the city, the pickup was gone. Mike sat in his cab after backing up to the loading dock, his hands shaking as he filled out his logbook. He'd been followed for nearly 48 hours and over 200 miles by a complete stranger who had shown no obvious hostile intent but had terrorized him through sheer persistence and unpredictability. He reported the incident to police, but as he'd feared, there was little they could do. Following someone on public roads isn't illegal, and the pickup truck's license plate had been too dirty to read clearly. The detective who took his statement mentioned that they'd received similar reports from other truckers over the past several months, but without concrete evidence of criminal intent, their hands were tied. 3 weeks later, Mike learned the truth from a fellow driver. The black pickup had been spotted following another truck near Flagstaff, the same route, the same pattern. This time, however, the stalker had miscalculated. Near a remote stretch of highway in New Mexico, he'd attempted to force the truck off the road, apparently planning some kind of robbery or assault. The trucker had fought back, using his CB to call for help while maneuvering his rig to block the pickup truck's escape route. When state police arrived, They found the stalker, a 43-year-old drifter named Robert Caldwell, with a collection of trucker photos, CB radio equipment for monitoring driver communications, and detailed maps marking truck stops and remote highway sections. Caldwell had been stalking truckers for over 8 months, studying their routes and habits, building up to increasingly bold confrontations. Mike realized he'd been a test case. Caldwell had been perfecting his technique, learning how long he could follow someone before they broke down or made a mistake that would leave them vulnerable. The case made regional news. But what haunted Mike wasn't the criminal's capture. It was the realization of how helpless he'd been during those 48 hours. Despite driving a massive vehicle on busy highways, surrounded by other travelers, he'd been completely isolated and vulnerable to someone with patience and bad intentions. Mike still drives trucks today, but he's never forgotten the feeling of being hunted on America's highways. He keeps a detailed log of vehicles that seem to follow him too long, maintains constant radio contact with other drivers, and never parks alone at remote truck stops. The black pickup is gone, but the fear it created lingers in every mile he drives, a reminder that predators can hide in plain sight on the nation's interstates, turning the loneliness of long-haul trucking into something far more sinister. Robert Caldwell was sentenced to 12 years in prison for stalking, attempted robbery, and endangering public safety. But for Mike Thompson and the other drivers who experienced his reign of terror, the damage was already done. Their sense of security on the open road shattered by 48 hours of being prey to an unseen predator whose motives they could only guess at, and whose next move they could never predict. Day 1. My name is Sarah Chen, and I'm writing this account while sitting in a police station in Bellingham, Washington. My hands are still shaking as I type these words. The officers keep telling me I'm safe now, but I know better. Some things you can never truly escape from, and what I experienced in those woods will haunt me for the rest of my life. It started as a simple hiking trip. My boyfriend Marcus and I had planned a 4-day trek through the Olympic National Forest. We were both experienced hikers. Marcus had been doing wilderness survival courses since college, and I'd been hiking the Pacific Northwest trails for over a decade. We thought we knew what we were getting into. The first day was perfect. Clear skies, moderate temperatures, and the kind of pristine wilderness that makes you forget the modern world exists. We set up camp near a small creek about 8 miles from the nearest road. That's when we first noticed the tracks. Marcus spotted them first, boot prints in the soft earth near our campsite. They were fresh, maybe a few hours old, and they circled our tent in a perfect ring before disappearing into the tree line. The prints were massive, easily size 14 or 15, with a distinctive diamond pattern on the sole. "Probably just another hiker checking out our setup," Marcus said. But his voice carried a note of uncertainty. "Though it's weird they didn't say hello." I nodded, trying to shake off the unease creeping up my spine. The tracks bothered me more than I wanted to admit. They were too deliberate, too methodical. No casual hiker would circle a campsite like that. It felt predatory. That night, I woke to the sound of branches snapping in the darkness beyond our tent. I lay perfectly still, listening to heavy footsteps moving through the underbrush. They circled our campsite again, the same deliberate pattern as the tracks we'd found earlier. I could hear breathing, deep, controlled inhalations that seemed to come from just outside our tent wall. I nudged Marcus awake. He listened for a moment, then grabbed his flashlight and unzipped the tent flap. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating empty forest. The footsteps had stopped. "Hello?" Marcus called out. "Is someone there?" Silence. Then, from somewhere deeper in the woods, we heard a low whistle. Not the kind you'd make to get someone's attention, but something that sounded almost like a signal. It was answered by another whistle from the opposite direction. We didn't sleep the rest of that night. Day 2 morning brought relief, but it was short-lived. As we packed up camp, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. Our food bag, which we'd hung from a tree branch 12 feet off the ground, had been cut down. Not clawed or torn, cut with a blade. The rope dangled uselessly, its end clean and straight.